So this is the listing of all the elements of a marketing plan. Again, most of you probably do all of this, and some of them are more probably relevant for B2B than for B2C, and some more for B2C, but I'm just going to talk a little bit because often I find that we don't structure a marketing plan across all of these elements. It's kind of like understood that we're going to do all of it, but we don't always. So the first bit is messaging, and I'm just going to ask a quick question. If any of you have actually done a messaging workshop in the last 1 year, if you could just type it into the chat window saying yes. Okay, I want to do one. I want to, yes, great. Okay, Arpita, that would be awesome. We'll talk about that. But why I bring this up is that often, again, the messaging tends to be something that is just kind of given to us, right? We inherit it, or the agency says, you know, okay, let's go with this. But every year we have to relook at the message from a perspective of why should someone buy us and not buy someone else. And this can change. So you might have a perfectly great reason for why someone should buy you and not someone else in 1 year, but that could dramatically change the very next year, right? And I'll give you an example. Like, you know, if you look at the Indian mobile phone market, you have somebody like a Micromax who was the market leader just a year ago. They were number 2 and taking on Samsung. And now if you look at it, I don't think they're even in the top 5. Now the messaging that you would have had 1 year ago as a leader would be very different from the messaging you need to have as a challenger. And this is true for IT as well. So the messaging that Wipro or an Infosys has when, you know, things are awesome in terms of the business environment, in terms of the global environment, is very different from the messaging they need today when they are under pressure from multiple factors, right? So you can't just have last year's message and ignore what's happened in the market today, because as soon as you take that message out to the market, for example, if you say digital transformation today, then people are going to be like, yeah, that's all very well, but how are you going to handle the visa crisis? Or, oh, we heard that, you know, you're having these troubles. So we have to revisit our messaging at least every 12 months, if not more often. And it's very important to have the answers to the 3 basic questions, which is, who am I, why buy me, and why not buy someone else? There's actually a speaker who's making a living talking about the answer to why, which is also why does the company do what it does, right? And that's also important to re-articulate, not just to your customers, but also internally, so that people understand why is it that you are in the business you are, what's the difference that you want to make to the world. So that's kind of like a very important piece which needs to have your CEO present, and has to be done as a refresher every year, because like I said, change. I mean, you know, you could have a particular product doing really well, and then your competitor enters the same space. You have to revisit the message entirely. The second one is media channels, that again you have to relook at every year at least, because we may be ignoring certain channels. How many of you actually have a marketing program running on Snapchat? Okay, hardly anyone. And again, you know, I feel this is because I didn't think Snapchat was that big a deal, but then the moment Ivan Spiegel says that, oh, you know, India is a poor country, and suddenly all these people come out saying, oh, I love Snapchat, and how could they do that? So again, it may not be relevant to every product, but if you have an audience which is younger, maybe, you know, in the 20 to 30 range, and not necessarily customers, but even your employees, many of them could be on Snapchat, and you know, it's just to revisit. I'm not saying that's your best channel. Maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's Twitter, but it helps to revisit all of these channels because things change, right? So even traditional media, things were really declining. Now again, you see that some channels are rising, some have adopted the internet. So you have to relook at all of these. Trade media, if you're in B2B, is a big deal, but it changes so much. I mean, so 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I would have definitely recommended trade channels for everyone. But today, I think the readership of trade channels on print is definitely going down, whereas digital is rising. So you have to factor that in. Media relations, again, changes quite often, but it's a factor that we must keep in mind, particularly for any brand that is likely to have a larger audience. And again, it's not just B2C, it is B2B. You can see one of my former organizations, Infosys, which frankly has ignored media relations and has issues because of that. So people are like, oh, why should they discuss this in the media? But the point is media finds it interesting and you're not able to manage your relationships with them. If you're in spaces like real estate or food and beverage, anything where the public has a lot of interest, then media relations is huge for you. Influencer relations, obviously all of you would probably be engaged in, but you need to have a structured program around it. And influencer today does not just mean those organizations which explicitly state that they are there to influence, but also individuals who have a large follower base on social media and can also therefore wield a fair bit of influence. Customer mining, all of you would obviously do that. Thought leadership, today I see a lot of organizations talking about content marketing, but that's really not the point. Content marketing, it kind of conveys that you have some factory churning out content, but that's like SEO content, but what you really want is thought leadership. And we talked about this in the previous module. You need to have a narrative and you need to have content that people would actually enjoy reading, and it's not just clickbait to get traffic onto your site. And I think in the desire for content, we are losing sight of thought leadership. The focus has become, can I get 1,000 articles out there, not whether I can actually say 10 things that my customers would find interesting. Number 7, the channel's promotion, which obviously all of you would be doing. Prospect mining, again, most of us would be doing. Partner marketing is again an interesting space. Not all of us do it and not all of us do it well. It's not something that's in the traditional Indian marketing toolkit, and we find it hard to build a relationship with a partner that is somewhat equal. So we always try to say that, oh my God, what if he's not my partner next year? So how do I maximize my benefits from that? And then we have events. And Sujit, I see your comment. I will come to that at the end of the slide. And then, of course, we have events. And I would like to include digital events as well in this space. And we're not really, and I see that Vishnu Pratap is here. So I want to talk a little bit about real estate. So I was recently helping someone house hunt in Sydney. And the market there is so different because in India, when you want to see a flat to rent, you can basically call that person and say that, hey, I just want to come and see it, and you fix up a mutual time. But in Sydney, because the market is pretty hot, they don't do it that way. They just put it up on the ad itself that this flat is available for viewing from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, and all those who are interested have to show up at that time. Now, what changes there is that you have made the showing of the flat an event, and they put up a little board and all of that stuff, and the 4 or 5 people who are interested are forced to show up there at that particular time. And also it builds pressure because you can see the other person getting really excited about this flat. And I was thinking that it would be nice because even if you want to buy a flat, it's pretty complicated to set up a time to meet. Whereas if the company's also created a little bit of a false sense of scarcity and said, we're very sorry, our flat is available for viewing only between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. on a Sunday, you would actually weed out those people who are just there to waste your time. So yeah, so I'd love to share this experience offline. It was very interesting because they've shifted from 10 agents running around showing 10 different flats to very structured. This is the time you can see it, and different agents have different time slots to show it, and it's very nicely organized, right? So there's a question on, can I talk a little bit about prospect mining for tech companies as an example? Okay, so prospect mining, I don't think I could teach you much because honestly, I think everybody tries to do everything. The one element which I think we could all consider is that I find that most of our prospect mining is very tactical. So we send out one newsletter, then we send out a case study, we will send out an event invitation, but we don't actually have a program which says that this prospect can be touched only X times per month or per week, and he must be touched X times per month or by week, right? So both are important. So on the one hand, sometimes there's this flurry saying that we must get this person, let's chase him, chase him, chase him. But then you'll find that he's been left in the cold for a month after that. So you have to have a systemic approach, and you may need to figure out, so you say that, I don't have enough stuff to reach out to this person more than once a month. You will have to figure out a way in which it is interesting for him. So maybe it is sharing a webinar, maybe it is sharing a dinner, whatever. Also to put an Excel sheet together and say that these are the tools that I have, and these are the amount of time that I want to reach out to each person, and put it together. The other kind of danger is that you tend to forget the old guys. I mean, the ones who've been in the system longer tend to kind of get ignored. So when you talk about an approach for prospect mining, I look at the community, and we talked a little bit about the community. I think that really works. If you treat it as a community of prospects, you find some affinity for them, and then you find a way to provide them with content or experiences that are relevant to them as a group. That works well, and I'm happy to kind of share more on that because that's actually what we do with some of our clients. Can share that in more detail. And Sujit says, content marketing has been key in my sector, but expanding beyond our, key existing publishing firms, right? So content marketing, like I said, it's key, but you have to distinguish between content that you're using to drive traffic to your site versus content that you're using to build your reputation or to keep them coming back. And that's where, I made the comment that I think thought leadership is suffering at the, expense of content. And again, even when we say thought leadership, it used to be that you had to have a white paper, but I don't personally believe anyone wants to read a white paper anymore. I think 500 words is the max that someone can read. And maybe LinkedIn pulses, where the action is today, and maybe we should just focus on that instead of trying to do multiple white papers and promoting them, because honestly today white papers people do download, but it's more to get basic information and then reach out to you. So this is a very complicated slide that I put together, and this is the buyer cycle. I'm afraid this is based on a B2B or a large complicated kind of a sale, but we have actually used it even for real estate, and it did work because the phases are the same and the kind of queries that people have are similar, and the marketing tools are very similar across B2B and B2C. I'm not going to go into detail on this one, but for those of you who asked, like, what do I do? I can, spend more time on the slide with you in person or on a call. But what I would recommend as a result of this slide is that if you have a buyer, can you put this down, right? And you would probably need to also sit with your team and figure out what are the queries that people have. And this, like I said, it works for anything that is complicated because you typically have initial research, and then they have a problem that they want to solve, then they shortlist, and then they go into final selection. So even if I was buying an apartment, I would go through the same phases, though the information that I would want from you would be different depending on what I was buying from you. But some of these things like, ROI, year-on-year savings, success stories, use cases, these are true for every industry. And the marketing tools, again, it's like, a whole bunch of things that we could look at. But having this slide when you make your marketing plan will help you to see whether you have covered all the possible routes. So you may not do all of them, but it's important that we discuss it and then say, hey, this doesn't work for me. So even something like payment models works for B2B and for B2C, because today there are so many ways in which you can structure payment, and that could actually be a differentiator for this particular service or product. But often marketing doesn't see payment as within its scope, and therefore, it's not really considered a marketing tool. So there's a bunch of stuff here. Unless someone specifically says, hey, walk through each one of these, I'm going to leave this slide as it is and have you go through it. And the deck will be available to you. So if you have specific questions, you can just email me. So this is the branding house that we discussed, and this is what I would call the heart of the messaging workshop, which is what does your organization do, which is who am I. Second is why should someone buy from your org, which is why buy me. And then the differentiator is why not buy someone else, as in, why should you not buy from the competition. And if you're able to answer these three questions, then, that's 90% of the battle won. But the balance 10% is if you are able to get your whole organization to agree. So often what happens is that, the marketing team is really clear, but the sales team has a different bunch of things that they're really clear. But then the next level doesn't actually agree with this stuff. And that's where things start to fall apart. Because if your whole organization does not agree, if you look at the 4 Ps, often you find that the one P that is most popular, okay, I'm going to do a quick poll, which is the most popular P to play around with from a sales perspective? Any answers? Promotion? Not in our experience. Price, yeah, Satyendra is absolutely right, it's price. So what happens when this is not tightly, so price is coming out, and see, that's the easiest, right? Really speaking, that's the easiest, but it's also the slipperiest slope. So if your differentiator is price, and if you're not a brand which is, basically high volume and the cheapest price, it becomes a problem. And Satyendra, absolutely nobody in marketing actually wants to endorse price, except those who are in a brand which is built on price, right? So as long as you're willing to say, I'm the cheapest and the best, and that's a great position in India, that's fine. But most of us are not. But when we don't actually have a differentiator that everybody agrees with, that becomes the default. And this is true even for very large and fancy IT firms. It's true for products. It's true for real estate. It's true for everyone. When I'm not able to find any other differentiator, then I just say, okay, I'm cheaper than the other guy, take the discount and please go. Which is why messaging, again, I come back to, is the most important thing, because from chairman downwards has to agree on this. And it's not just agree. So for example, we have done workshops where, the company and everybody agrees that innovation is their differentiator. But if you can't show a lab, if you can't show R&D spend, then, that whole story doesn't hold good, because that's what the client is going to ask, right? So again, if you say differentiator and you want to show in any space, right? So you say that you have the fastest build time, or the, whatever, costing, the best flooring, then you need to win awards. You need to invest in that. So there's a whole process that you follow. Once you have identified your differentiator, you say, okay, for each of these attributes, how am I going to support it? And then can I get third-party credentials that endorse it, right? And it, everybody wins awards, but you have to win the right kind of awards also that support your particular differentiator. And it gets tougher and tougher as the market gets more crowded, but you have to find a reason for someone to buy, and then you have to kind of go in and build that differentiator out for them. So the media channels, this is quite simple. I mean, earned, paid, owned, print, digital, and activations is just a format. And again, all my formats are very simple. It's just that I find it useful to tabulate it just to make sure that a particular channel is not being left out. And it gives lots of scope for people to put it. But when you put this plan together, you may find that, for example, earned has not been considered or owned has not been considered, and therefore you can plug the hole there. So I just wanted to put this up because this is one of my pet peeves at the moment. So what's an ad? It's really hard today to tell the difference between organic content and paid content. And actually for clients without a very deep pocket, today I'm actually saying that media relations, if you're looking at it to get your organic content, you might as well take the money and put it into paid content because you're not going to get organic content. Not at least in the very large business publications that most people are craving. The whole space of organic content has changed. So media relations today can be used for you to promote your promoter, or perhaps in a crisis situation, or to shape it when you have a big trade issue at an industry level. But if for your organization you are expecting to get publicity without paying, that today is going to be a fairly large challenge for you, right? So, I've just put this page up. It's really hard for me to tell the difference between our organic content and paid content. And I think most consumers are also in the same situation where, they can't really tell. So, it's getting really hard for people is all I'm saying. And if you have to spend $1 lakh a month on media relations, I feel that you might get faster results and more economically if you just go ahead with paid media. So anyone contradicts that, put it in the chat window. So influencer relations, well, obviously we want to have influencers say awesome stuff about us. So the only thing is that, again, it would be helpful if people shared their connection with the brand. So, but again, across categories, it's awesome if we can get influencers to endorse our products and solutions. So we talk a little bit about customer mining. So retention, advocacy, cross-sell, upsell. And this really is what we try and do for our clients as well. So we run communities which, so we talked a little bit about prospects. This is about customers. But again, customers are looking for reward and recognition as well. And a community approach really works because you're able to connect your customers with your prospects and also give your existing customers the reward and recognition that they are seeking. And I put this up because, again, if you're in B2B, obviously do account-based marketing. But I think in B2C, often there is space available. I'm always surprised at the number of brands that I have purchased from who never approached me thereafter. And these are like significant purchases. So if I have bought a fancy car or a fancy flat, then I would imagine that person would come back to me and say, hey, you bought this from me a few years ago. Would you not like to now upgrade or buy? But most of them so far have not actually managed to find me and send me something that is useful, right? And it's always puzzling to me why. But I understand that we're a growth market, so usually it's easier to catch a new client. But today, I think, it's fairly easy to find an existing client, and therefore putting in place a program helps. Thought leadership. So again, different or variations of the same thing, and you can, depending on which space you're in, you can go for comedy, you can give research about your leather, you can do anything. But if you're in B2B, then again, the usual tools of, webinars and content books and tweet chats and so on and so forth. So again, we did talk a little bit about this, but these are the ways in which you can do it. And sometimes, your thought leadership can be in some totally different space. So maybe you own a conference or an award, that highlights your reason to exist or the why in your space. So promotions, I really like this slide because it shows how much promotions have changed since really the good old days. Because what happens, and I want to walk you through this journey, is that the 4 Ps are changing in real time. So we have an empty trolley and he's got a full trolley. And if he gets a discount when it's in the trolley, he's very happy. But when he gets a discount, once he's reached home, he's very unhappy, right? Or once he's finished the purchase, he's very unhappy. And this happens to us all the time. You just book a flight or a holiday and then you get a message saying that, oh, we noticed that you were looking and you got 20% discount. And in just 5 minutes, you've lost my respect because you gave it too late. Now again, so he's happy, he's reached home, he's ordered his stuff, and unfortunately the stuff arrives and is broken. I'm again unhappy, but if you fix it for me or you give me something to make me happier again, I am, again going to change my view of you. So the thing is that all 4 Ps actually can be played around in real time, and it depends whether, we do it correctly. So the trouble is that the customer's view is changing every 2-3 minutes, and do we have promotions that are accurately targeted to change his mind at that particular time, or which will enhance his experience, right, at that particular time. So if you send me a promotion on, let's say, interior decoration for an apartment when I'm struggling to, get my loan together, I'm very unhappy with you. But if you send it to me 3 months before the flat is complete, I am very happy with you. So if you send me a promotion before a large trade show for a B2B product, then, I'm very happy with you. But if you send it 3 months before, I just forget all about it. So it's very useful to segment it based on the time and the customer journey, because, in today's world, everything is real time. And we don't actually consider time as a factor in most marketing campaigns. It's just, we're still operating on the old thing that if I run a campaign, it's for 3 months. But maybe we should look at segmenting it by time as well, and as well as stage of the customer journey. So that's my point with this one, that we have a lot of tools available to us which can be pushed out to customers digitally in real time, but we don't necessarily make use of all of these tools. So prospect mining, again, it's an automated nurturing program. I'm sure most of you are already using something like this. And so I'm just putting it up saying that if you don't have one, then you should have one. But this is pretty much, I'm sure all of you on this webinar are already using something like this. So this was just something I put in as awareness or persuasion. I just find that a lot of effort is going into awareness, but it doesn't persuade me enough. It just kind of keeps saying the same stuff over and over again. So remarketing was very, very popular, but you need a new message every time we do this. Otherwise, it just becomes awareness over and over again. I talked a little bit about the partner ecosystem. So I just wanted to put in place what are all the elements that I looked at when we talked about it. And again, this works for every industry. So you just have to kind of figure out who fits the bill for your specific industry. So last one is events. I personally love events. Those of you who know me know that I love them. But again, I wanted to make the point that different formats work for different products and services, but events still really work, particularly in a country which is has a high density of customers and where people are very keen on personal interactions. And if you don't have events as a part of your mix, I strongly recommend that you get them in. And you can look, beyond the obvious kind of events that are specific to your industry and look at, even like, sports, yachting, anything, right? Yeah, and events are still working. I mean, there's been talk about the demise of events for the last 10 years, but if you look at conversions, events work awesomely well. So yeah, and they get really wacky. So the cartoon is, when I grow up, I want to be an ad for Red Bull. And nowadays, actually, it becomes a career. When a kid says, I want to be a YouTuber, literally they are saying they want to be an ad for some product, and the parents are like, oh, wow, man, you're going to be a millionaire. So I think the world is changing. You know, we have to look at events from the framework that you can have a large virtual audience in addition to your physical audience. And, you know, I still think that if you have a budget, a lot of it should go towards events from a conversion perspective and from a persuasion perspective. So with that, we're at the end of the lunch hour chat, and I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions anyone has. But for the rest of you, I did hope you had sufficient food for thought, and I hope to see you back again next Friday for the next module. And this is a certification program, and it's powered by Microsoft, and we do have a little assessment test at the end of it for you to get the certificate. So thanks to all of you for joining us today, and do tell your friends.